All right, students, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. It's been a while since we've done one of these live streams, so I hope that everybody's hanging in there and getting ready for this March SAT. If you're joining us and it's not, you're watching this as a recording later, no worries at all, whether it be for the March SAT or for any SAT for that matter. Not a big deal. You can always access this. The same stuff that we're going to talk about today, at least for the foreseeable future, will apply to any SAT exam. So I hope you guys get a lot out of it today. If you have any questions, if you're watching live and you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment in the chat. If you're watching the recorded version of this, don't hesitate to comment below the video. And one of our teachers or tutors will make sure that we respond before any big SAT. We're always responding to comments as often as we can in the days leading up to any big SAT exam. So please make sure that you comment in the chat or comment below if you guys do have any questions. Otherwise, I am Chase. I will be leading you through the SAT review today. For those that have seen the channel before, hopefully you guys have gotten a lot out of these reviews in the past. And again, please make sure that you have any comments. Put those in the chat. Keep it civil. Keep it appropriate, of course. Make sure that you're only commenting things that will be helpful to everybody. Otherwise, we'll have to remove you from the chat. Couple things, guys, before we get started. Please make sure that you have your Star U tutoring app downloaded. Star U, I posted it, or our tutor posted it, or one of our teachers rather posted it in the chat before the live stream started today. Please make sure that you guys download and create your free student account. We have thousands of SAT and ACT practice problems on the app. So if you click lessons and practice problems, once you've logged in and registered, it takes 5 seconds to register. Once you've logged in and registered, you can click Lessons and Practice Problems on the home screen. And now you have access to SAT writing and language practice problems and lessons. You have grammar quizzes that you can be going over. But again, it can be really, really helpful. Most importantly, probably more than anything, all of this can be really easily accessed from your phone. So if you download this in the App Store or Google Play, all of this can be accessed from your phone, which makes it very, very, very easy to be completing warm-up questions, which we'll talk more about that today. But I am absolutely adamant that everybody be completing warm-up problems before you get to the actual test, right? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if you're watching the live chat? Can you guys give me a thumbs up either in the chat, or if you don't want to be part of the chat, you can just give me a thumbs up in the below the video. But just make sure, guys, that again you're downloaded Star U. Download Star U in the App Store or in Google Play. You can also access it from a web browser. But I want to make sure that everybody has access to that, because when we start talking about the warm-up and what to do prior to taking the test, this is going to be a big component of that, okay? So again, please make sure that you guys have those things ready to go. You have Star U downloaded. And we will get started here in just a second. Additionally, if anybody is interested in joining our membership channel, this is $3 a month. If you guys are interested, you get access to significantly more premium content as part of the membership program. So if you are interested, I will post information about that here in just a second, and then we will get started with the review. Okay, guys. Again, thumbs up in the chat if you guys are participating live. If you have any questions while we go through this and you're watching live, please make sure that you post those questions in the chat, and I'll hopefully answer those. If you're watching this after the live review has concluded, you guys can just post your questions in the comments section below, and one of our teachers or teachers or teaching assistants will comment on that prior to the next test. If we can find this. Here we go. Okay, so again, if you guys are anybody interested in joining our membership program, you guys can click this link. You can see all of the premium content in the playlist. So SAT premium. Okay, so there's the playlist for all that premium content. All right, guys. So let's get started. With all of that in mind, let's get started. Again, please make sure that you have Star U downloaded. That part is free, 100% free, and this gives you access when we start talking about how important it is to warm up, to be doing these little things that otherwise won't seem important, to be doing those things prior to test, right, to starting on test day. You guys will be amazed at how helpful that will be. So please make sure that you have that downloaded, and we'll be talking about that as we go through the lesson today. Again, can anybody for everybody that's watching live, can everybody give me a thumbs up either below the video or in the chat section to say that you're ready to go, that you know how to comment, that you know what you're doing here, and then we will get started. And one final thing, guys. So as we transition out of this and go start talking about the actual test, please note that we will be using SAT test form number 9, SAT test 9. So this is just directly from the College Board website. It's a good test for this type of review because the scale is pretty reasonable, pretty even compared to overall. So this is SAT Test 9. If you'd like to follow along with any part of the video, SAT Test 9 and the link to this, right, both the scoring, and the test form, those can both be found, again, as free links in the video description below. So please click on those if you'd like to follow along. And again, I think that will give you a better sense as to what we're talking about today. And if you guys like what you see today, if you don't want to join the membership channel for money, make sure that you at least subscribe to the channel by clicking subscribe below the video. And let's get going here, okay? Just covering up some of the things. So, guys, as many of you know, let's just start with the very, very basics, right? For those that have never seen this before, I don't think that's many of you, but let's start with the idea, right, that the SAT test is graded on a 1600 scale. And for those of you that are sitting there being like, is this what he's going to talk about the whole time? No, it's not. But we have to establish this first. Okay, we have to establish this first. Again, if you're watching live or if you have any questions as we go through this, please don't hesitate to ask those in the chat. I'm sure they'll be helpful for other students as well. But SAT, right, 1600, breaking up into two sections, right? There's an RWL section, which is reading, writing, and language. That's out of 800 points. And then we have math sections, right, which also are out of 800 points. And the question that you guys have to ask yourself before we get started, we have to be really, really reasonable with what we're talking about. And namely, the fact that we've never been graded, never in your life have you been graded on a 1600 scale before. That is a very, very important thing to recognize. Okay, for a lot of you, you're probably sitting there being like, how in the world am I going to get to how am I going to get these great scores that I need to get into this college or XYZ, right? And that puts a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on this test that you don't need to be putting on yourself, at least for right now. Because again, when you think about this, right, a 1600 is not, that's an arbitrary number. And if you don't believe me on that, 1600 is so arbitrary that the ACT, which is the equivalent test, right, to the SAT, the ACT is out of 36. Both of those tests get you into college, so there's no reason that you should think that a 1600 is a score. But what happens is if we go into every SAT exam, right, with a certain score in mind, what ultimately ends up happening is when things start to go poorly, right, when we don't feel great about the test overall, all we can think about is that score. That is not how we want to approach this. If your only focus is on the score, it's going to be, because it's so arbitrary. Again, think you've never been graded on this scale before. If that's all that you're thinking about when something starts to go poorly, right? When you have a bad section, or oh no, I'm always worried about the reading section or the math sections, it's a very, very downhill slope, right? A big spiral can happen very quickly, solely because we're thinking about something that is completely out of our control and something that we frankly don't need to be worried about. Okay, so I'm going to give you a different approach. I'm going to give you a new approach. Does that all make sense, guys? Thumbs up if it does make sense. Thumbs up in the chat, or thumbs up below the video. Thumbs up somewhere if that all makes sense. And what I'm coming down to with that is I'm going to give you a different approach to how I want you to establish, how I want you to go into tomorrow's test or any SAT exam in the future. This is so critical just in general, but so critical for tomorrow, especially if you're a type of student that gets anxious or gets nervous about these SAT exams and what they could mean for your college potential, for your life potential, blah, 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 right? All of the above. The first thing that I want you guys to do is I want you to establish a goal score. And the moment that you establish a goal score, forget about the SAT number. Okay, forget about the SAT number. So let's say, for example, your goal score on the math section is to get a 650. Okay, get 650. That's great, right? That's a number. You have that in mind. That's the number that you want to score. But after you've established that number, you want to forget about it for the most part. And what I mean by that is rather than thinking about a 650, I want you to think about the number of questions. So guys, by the way, we're using SAT test form number 9. If you weren't joining us, you can find this test form. You can download it in the link below for free. So download SAT test scoring test form 9. This is also there. And then we're looking at page number 8. Okay, so we're looking at page number 8. What you will see is the detailed breakdown of the scale for every SAT exam. This just happens to be for SAT test number 9 from the College Board website. I think it's a good representation of what we're trying to talk about today. Again, a 650 is completely arbitrary. That doesn't mean anything to you, and it doesn't mean anything to any high school student. I have never seen another test or anything be graded on a 1600 scale again. So if that's what's in our mind, we're not going to know how to deal with adversity, with anything that goes wrong, because we're only thinking about something that doesn't actually matter in any other aspect of our lives. Does that make sense? Thumbs up. That is so critical to being a great test taker and of being a great SAT test taker tomorrow or anytime in the future. Is no longer thinking about this as the score. Of course, the score is going to matter in terms of what you get into college with, but ultimately, once we've established a goal score, we want to think about the number of questions that we need to answer correctly in order to obtain that goal score. That's all. That's all we're thinking about. We want to think about the number of questions needed to obtain that goal score. And once we have that number in mind, that's the number we're going to focus on going forward. So for example, you'll see 43 here. Okay, the 43 corresponds to the number of total correct answers. All right, 43 is the number. 650 is a phenomenal math score. If you're not already getting there, then that's a number I want you to focus on. If you're above a 650 on the math section already, that's fine. Just continue to set your sights on what we're discussing. Don't go into this, even if you're the best math test taker in the world, do not go into tomorrow or any test thinking, I have to get an 800. That puts way too much stress on you as a test taker, and if anything goes wrong, there is no margin of error, right? There's no margin for error if you go into it thinking I need an 800. Instead, go into it thinking I need a 780. And for all purposes, if you think I need a 780, then the 800 is going to happen. But we don't want to go into it and put that pressure on ourselves immediately, or everything can spiral very quickly. Once we have our goal number in mind, right, we have a 650 as our goal score, but really we're now going to think about this as 43 questions. Okay, 43 questions. And here's what we're going to do. I want everybody to write down that 43 out of 58 for this test number 9 is equivalent to a 650. And that's pretty close. That's a pretty good representation of most math tests, right? It's going to be, it might be 41 or 42 or 44, 45, somewhere in there. But ultimately, this is a good number, okay? Because it says that for minus 150 points, right, we miss 15 questions. And that's about average 10 points, right, divided by 10 points minus 10 points per question. That's a pretty good representation if you want to think about this very basically. Okay? So from there, we know that 43 out of 58 is the number that we need to achieve in order to score 650 on this particular math test. And so let's break that down. There are 58 total math questions, right? 58 math questions. But the math test is very unique in that it is divided, right, into both. It's divided into two sections, but ultimately they combine for the same section score. So there are 20 questions on the no calc section, and I know this is relatively basic review here, and there are 38 questions on the calc section. Okay, but what that means is if we're trying to get 43 done, and there are almost twice as many questions times 2 from the no calc to the calc section, and we're trying to get 43 out of 58, right? 43 out of 58 gets us our 650 goal score. If that's your goal, I think that's a great goal score for anybody to have. If you're already above that because you're a great math student, that's awesome. But I think 650 is a great generic goal score for everybody to have. If we know that and we got to get 43 questions right, that means that generally speaking, right, we need to get, let's say we need to get 13, let's say 14 out of 20 questions right here, 14 out of 20 here. And then we need to get 29 out of 38 here. That's a pretty good number, right? 29 out of 38. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. That if we do 14 on the no calc section, and you know, again, this is not set in stone, this is not scientific, just roughly somewhere around 14 questions. And then we're going to roughly double that number because there are roughly double the number of questions on the calc section. We're thinking we got to get about 29 questions right on the math with the calculator section. Okay, so does that all make sense? Everybody feel comfortable with that? Thumbs up, guys. Does anybody have any questions? Again, you guys should be able to comment in the chat if you have any questions. Please let us know if you do. And okay, but hopefully that all makes sense. So what that means, guys, is we're going to approach this test not thinking about the 14 questions that we can answer. We're going to think about, hey, I can skip the 6 hardest questions on this test if I want to get a 650. I can skip the 9 hardest questions on this test if I want to get a 650. Think about the stress that takes off of you. Right? Think about how much better you feel thinking I can skip 9 and then I can skip 6 and then I can skip 9 questions and I'll still obtain my goal score. Does that make sense? Thumbs up, guys, if that generally makes sense. That if you just skip 9 questions, if you skip 6 questions, you're going to be in a phenomenal position. If you're accurate on the other questions, you're going to be in a phenomenal position to answer to get a 650 on this test. Okay, so again, the math scores are combined into two of the same, right? 2 of the same score. So every question on the math no calculator test is worth the same in point value as every question on the math with a calculator test. That brings me to another point, right? Don't give up. If you don't love math, if you're a great reading and writing and language student, but you don't love math, and so you're going into this with a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of anxiety, don't give up on the no calc section. Okay, don't give up on that just because you're overwhelmed or you're anxious, you're worried. Don't do that. Right? Instead, we want to be constantly thinking about how we can continue to improve, right? Once we get to the calculator section, because we know that, hey, there are double as many questions. There are twice as many questions on the calculator section. So I'm going to have points to make up if I don't feel like I did great on the no calculator section, or if going into this, I don't feel great about the no calc section in general. Does that all make sense? We're going to get more into this as the review goes along. We're going to go through each individual section and talk about some general strategies for each section. But does that all make sense from just a general thought for the math section, that the 20 questions from no calc, 38 questions from calc are combined into a total of 58 math questions? We are no longer thinking about this as a test in the same way that we think about a school test. We are thinking about this as, if I want to get to a 650, if my goal score is a 650, then I need to find the 43 questions that I know how to answer in order to obtain that 650 score. Okay, everybody good with that? Thumbs up, guys, if you are. If you have any questions, please make sure, if you don't see the chat, hopefully everybody sees the chat in the live chat. If you're joining us live, there's quite a few of you right now. If you are joining us live, please, you can unhide the chat. Hopefully everybody can see it still, though. And please make sure that you ask any questions. Happy to answer those as we go through this. If you're joining us beyond the live stream and you're watching this as a review after, as the recorded review, don't hesitate to comment any questions or concerns that you have. You can always comment those in the comment section below. Okay? So hopefully all of that makes sense. Now, what's unique about the math section is that the 2 sections are combined. That is very different from the reading and the writing and language score. Okay, the reading and writing and language score, unlike the math sections, are combined after you've graded each section. So the reading sections out of 400. You can see this. This is really goofy what the SAT does here. You can just think of all of these scores when you look at a scale. You can just think of all of these scores as 370, 380, 390. I don't know why they do that, to be honest. It's just confusing. And then ultimately they end up making you multiply by 10 at the very end. But they don't do that for math. It's classic SAT, just doing stuff that doesn't make any sense. College Board, right? But writing and language is also out of 400. And then those are added together to give you the total 800 score. Okay, so 800. Now, what's important to recognize about this is that this is opposite of math in the sense that we're not looking for each individual, we're not looking to combine the sections. We want to know that, hey, if I don't feel great, if reading is my worst subject area, then I want to do everything in my power to be as strong with my grammar rules as I possibly can be. Because if I know that if I'm really strong on those, I can still make up for a poor reading section. So, for example, guys, if you only answer 35, look at this. The reading section, and while it's the hardest section, and we'll talk about that in a second as well, while the reading section is the hardest section, you only need to answer 35 out of 52 questions. That means you can skip two passages essentially. You could skip two passages and you would still end up with a 300 score. 300, right? 300, 35 out of 52 on the reading section. Okay, and so let's say that your reading is not where you want it to be tomorrow, right? You don't feel comfortable with that. If your grammar score, right, if your writing and language score is really strong because you've memorized the grammar rules, and ultimately that's the most important thing with that section, and you end up getting all 44 of those questions right, which is 44 out of 44 is a much higher likelihood than 52 out of 52 on reading. If you get a 400 on the writing and language test, even if you have a bad reading test, right, those end up averaging out to a 700. So the biggest piece of advice that I can give anybody that's studying beyond just for tomorrow's test, right, and just watching the review, is to make sure that with all of your heart and soul, you focus on the writing and language score and bumping that up to as high as it can possibly be before you ever think about the reading test. Because the reading section is the hardest section, but that doesn't mean that you have to answer. The reading section is the hardest section, but it also has the most favorable scale. Okay, so reading has the, let's just write that. Reading is the most favorable scale by far. Most favorable. Like I said, you can miss 17 questions and still end up with 300. So reading most favorable scale. And so all of the strategy work that we just talked about with math applies even more so to the reading. Most favorable scale. So it's most advantageous, right? Most advantageous on the reading score. Does that make sense? Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Thumbs up. If you have any questions on that, again, please don't hesitate to comment those in the chat. But the reading score is the most advantageous to you. And so we're going to talk about reading strategy here in a second. But it's the most advantageous to you. Okay, everybody good to go? If you guys are watching live and you feel like it's okay to chat, believe me, I'll answer any questions. I think this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions. Please make sure that you ask those within the chat. Okay, if you don't see the chat, then you can comment below this video, right, in the comments section and just say, I don't see it, and I'll try to work through that, troubleshoot through it. Otherwise, can anybody that's watching live just say good to go, that all of this generally makes sense? To be a great test taker, you need to understand the SAT scale. To be a great test taker, let me repeat that. To be a great test taker, you need to understand the SAT scale, first and foremost. And before you ever get worried or overwhelmed about your score, which the 1600 doesn't matter. The 1600 doesn't matter in the sense that you have never seen a 1600 scale in your life, ever, nor will you after this test. You'll never see it again. So why in the world, if we have never seen that, if we have no familiarity with the 1600 score, why in the world, right, would we ever focus on that number rather than focus on something that we've always seen, which is just thinking about how many questions do I need to get answered correctly, like on a math final, right, or anything in school? How many questions do I need to answer correctly in order to obtain that score, right? We don't want to be thinking about the score itself. We want to be thinking about the number of questions that you need to answer, and the only way to do that effectively is to actually break down, right? Break down the number of questions from the scale. So you come over here, you look at the test, and again, all of these links have been posted in the video description below. So if you're following along with this, just open that video description, click on this link, and I think it'll make a lot more sense if you're following along. And now you just set your own, right? You set your own, here we go, right? You set your own pace. Does that make sense? Pretty good with that idea? All right, guys. So, in addition to all of this, I have some more good news for you for anybody that's participating here. Star Tutors, and before we get to any individual sections, Star Tutors SAT pre-test packet. So, guys, if you click this link in the video description, okay, you'll see a pre-test packet that we have created for all of you, so that you guys have access to complete some warm-up problems, to see some really helpful videos that are all in one place, helpful videos all in one place. If you click that link that's now in what I would recommend is I would recommend either printing that or downloading it when you get a chance. Open that link, and within that you will find some really helpful warm-up questions. You'll find some really helpful practice links, right? Things that you can be doing just the day before the test. And I think, again, if you click that, it'll be really, really helpful as you go through this. So I encourage you guys to look at that. That's the pre-test link, and that's talking about a lot of the stuff that we're going to finish with at the end, which is getting yourself in the right position to not be tired, to have done some warm-up practice, to do all of the little things that end up mattering in a big, big way come test day. Okay, does that all make sense? Everybody good? So that's the link that's now posted in the chat. Hopefully everybody can access that. And let me do one more thing. Let me see if I can post this as a comment as well, just so you guys have that. Okay, guys. So the next thing that we're gonna do, give me one sec here. We're gonna pull up the SAT writing in the language section. I'm sorry, the SAT reading section. So we're gonna look at the SAT reading section next. Okay. All right, so guys, as we look at all of these things, again, hopefully that all makes sense from just a general scale perspective. The number one thing that I can recommend going into tomorrow, I wouldn't even focus too much on any individual section. I would put so much effort, so much time into working through what your goal score is going to be and then applying an actual number of questions. So we have to come up with a goal score. If your goal is to get a 1400, then set the sights on whichever test is better, right? Or whichever score section is better for you. That's fine. But then start to look at it from a perspective of how many questions do I need to answer to actually obtain that score? Okay, how many questions do I need to answer to actually obtain that score? So hopefully all that makes sense just generally. All right, guys, so with that in mind, let's go back, and we are going to start talking a little bit more about the SAT test. We're going to SAT in general. So what I'd like everybody to do is I'd like everybody to open SAT test number 9 for me, SAT test 9, which can also be found within the video description below. And we're going to start with the reading section. Okay, we're going to start with the reading section here. Anybody have any trouble with reading generally? If you do, then I highly recommend that you watch this. Pay close attention. We're gonna go through some really helpful ideas, I think, related to not only reading but how you can best strategize. If you guys want more reading help, SAT reading tips, tricks. Please access the playlist that I just posted. The playlist that you guys will see that I just posted, that's the playlist for SAT reading. It's a very popular playlist. It has probably all of our best SAT reading videos. So again, I encourage you to check that out and go through that. All we're trying to do today, guys, is give you guys as many resources as we possibly can to make sure that you're ready to go for tomorrow or for really any test in the future. So for anybody that's watching, thumbs up if this all makes sense so far, and let's get into it with some SAT reading. Okay, so with relation to the SAT reading section, there's some very, very key components that can really, really help us and not allow us to get too overwhelmed. Okay, now the one thing that you want to remember about the SAT reading section that's going to be different from our strategy on math, SAT reading, okay, SAT reading 52 questions, 52 questions, 65 minutes, right? That's just some general knowledge. There are always 5 passages with 10 to 11 questions per passage. 10 to 11 questions per passage. Okay? Thumbs up, guys, if you probably all knew all that. Okay, before we get started with any actual strategy, right, with the reading section, one thing this is one of it. So we're going to talk about three components, three ways to improve your SAT reading score. And one of them, this first one is more of like a long-term approach. So if you guys are feeling a little overwhelmed with kind of this next part, just know that this first one is more of a long-term approach. So it's probably not going to be too useful for tomorrow if you're taking the March SAT, or for an in-school SAT. It maybe will be helpful if it's at the beginning of April, because I know there's a lot of those in the U.S. But here's what I want you to write down, is that on the SAT, let me give myself a little bit more space here. On the SAT reading section, the passage order is always the same. Okay, so here's what I have all of our students do. We're going to write down that the passage order is always the same. It's always in this order. The first passage is always a narrative. It's always a story. Okay, the second passage is always a historical passage or a social science passage. So the second and the fourth passage will just turn over, right? Social science, history or social science. 3 is always I'm going to call it natural science for the sake of, it's more of like well, let's call it natural science, right? Just to make it easy for ourselves, natural science. 4 is the other history or social science passage. Okay, so 1, 2, or 4, talking about things like, economics will be one, or there's one recently that was talking about like traffic controls. Okay, that's more of a social science than, this could be natural science as well, but natural science for 5. Okay. The social science passages and the natural science passages are the ones where you typically see the graphs and the charts, so look out for those as well. Okay, but as we look at this, one of the areas that we have students try to improve upon always is we always create this chart. Okay, so oops, I kind of run into my own writing here. Right, we have them create this chart. We have them write out all of the 4 passages, or all of the 5 passages, right? And then we have them write it like this. Okay, and we put time and accuracy up here. Time and accuracy. And again, this is not necessarily something that's going to be really helpful for tomorrow's test or any test in the very, very near future, but it's an incredible way to practice, right? Because one really common misconception with this test, I should say with this section, is that you need to answer every question. That's a very, very big misconception that you should no longer follow. And it's not even me just saying that, right, and hoping that that's right. That's the case based on the scale that we just looked at, right? Remember before, we said that 35 out of 52 questions, 35 out of 52, that means that you could skip 17 questions and still end up with a 300 score. If your goal is to get a 700 between those first two, 300 plus 400 on writing and language, right, is equivalent to the 700. And let me tell you that the writing and language section is significantly easier, right? Section number 2 is significantly easier than section number 1. So don't discount the idea that if we skip questions, right? If you skip questions on the reading section so that you can maintain a better accuracy, your score is going to be so much more consistent. Most students think that this is the right way to go, to focus on time. I got to rush through this. Wrong. That is not the right way to go. It's super, super inconsistent. And what ends up happening, and some of you may have already experienced this, is that you get you might have one really, really good score, right? Really good reading score, and that makes you feel like you're on top of the world. And then the very next time, because you were focused on timing and you just happen to have a good test, which is a little bit of luck, right? The very next time out, you have a horrible score and you don't know what happened. You don't know why it changed, We want to avoid that at all costs. We do not want to worry about timing until we're trying to get to the very, like, unless you're trying to get every question right and you've proven that you can get almost every question right to that time and you're just trying to take the final step to get a 400. Until that point, do not focus on timing at all. I cannot stress that enough. Do not focus on timing at all. Instead, what I want you guys to see is that if you focus, let's say you go through this, right? And we have students use a stopwatch. So this is a very helpful drill. Use a stopwatch and time yourself how long it takes you to get each passage done and what your accuracy is on each passage. So for example, on the natural science passage, let's say you like to read about science or you don't even like to read about it, but the questions are very straightforward on passages 3 and 5. Let's say that's you, right? And you get 11, you get 10 out of 10 here and you get 11 out of 11 here, right? And you do this in 15 minutes and you do this one in 17 minutes. And you realize, hey, that adds up to 32 total minutes. I've gotten 32 minutes and I've already answered 21 out of 21. Guys, the reason this drill can be so helpful is because when you use a stopwatch and not a timer and you're really focused on being a better test taker rather than focusing on what the score is or when you can stop doing this test, with the reading section, if you focus like this and you get 21 out of 21, now all of a sudden you realize, hey, I have 33 minutes to focus on any one of the other passages, 33 minutes, and in order to achieve a score of 300, I only need to answer 14 questions correctly in 33 minutes. Guys, thumbs up if that makes sense. Think about that, how big of an advantage it is from a stress and anxiety standpoint if you're no longer focusing on the time and trying to rush through every passage, and instead you have it down to a science about which of the passages you are best prepared to accomplish. And if you do that, right, now you're at 17 minutes, you've broken it down. This is not necessarily a strategy that's really useful for tomorrow's test, but it is extremely useful for anybody that's going to take the test after tomorrow. And I have to believe that's a significant majority of you, because the March test that we're talking about for tomorrow, that isn't really a test that you use that you can exclusively use for college, or it's not the last test, I should say, before you have to apply to college. So this is a drill that I would try to implement after tomorrow's test every single time you sit down to think about a reading section. Okay, because again, let's say that you realize that, and then, okay, now the narrative is going to take me a little bit longer. So this one takes me 25 minutes, and I get 9 out of 10 here. Okay, so now I'm 9 out of 10. Now I realize that's a lot of time. I don't think it's actually going to, let's even be more realistic here. Let's say this one takes you 20 minutes to get the narrative done. Okay. And you realize, okay, if that took me 20 minutes, right? That took me 20 minutes. I was a little less accurate. I now have 13 minutes, right? I have 13 minutes, and I'm going to try to find, minus the 9 questions that I answered correctly, I have 13 minutes now to find 5 additional questions that I can answer, and that's going to get me to my 300 goal score on the reading section. That's how you want the reading test is so strategy based. There's not a lot of content. Okay, there's not a lot of content. So if you know that, you gotta be practicing your strategies as much as you can. And what's beautiful about this drill that we have set up here and recognizing what this really is it helps you know exactly which passage order you should do. So for example, right, the person that has this lined up should go 1, 3, 5. And if you don't typically if you recognize that you write down a bad time, right, and a bad accuracy for both of the 2 natural science, social science, and history passages, then you just need to figure out 2 through 4. You just have to find 5 questions on 2 passages that you don't like to do. You've eliminated the possibility of getting freaked out, right, or phased out by the 2 harder passages for you. That's going to be different for every student, but it's something that every student should be implementing to figure out which passage order is best for you. And that's a very good way to do it. Use a stopwatch, take down your time, take down your accuracy for each individual passage, see how long it takes you to get those ones done, and then assign some value to which passages you want to do first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Thumbs up, guys, if that all makes sense. Thumbs up if that makes sense. I cannot stress enough how important and how impactful that idea alone has been for all of our individual students. And if you're willing to implement it, I think it will be very useful and helpful for you as well. But again, you got to be willing to implement it. So thumbs up if that makes sense. Okay. The next thing that I want to bring up, and this is so critical for both reading and then for all of the math multiple choice. It'll make sense when we get to the math multiple choice. But reading is entirely a multiple choice test, right? It's all multiple choice. Every single question on the reading section is equivalent to multiple choice. And that gives us such a major advantage. Again, I can't even begin to describe this. Okay? We have to recognize what it takes to be a great test taker. And in order to do that, before we ever worry about content, let's be great test takers, because that can carry you just as much as memorizing every math concept in the book. Being just a great test taker, recognizing the math behind getting a better score is so essential. If we know that everything is multiple choice, right? And let's say you guys stay focused and you're only looking at 35 out of 52 questions, okay? And by doing that, you're not focused on any other questions that you don't feel comfortable with because you've practiced and you've figured out which one is your best section, right? Where are your best sections, your best passages? You take 65 minutes, or let's say 64 minutes, right? 64 minutes to find the 35 best questions for you and you alone, right? Based on passage order, whatever it might be. Let's say we do that, and then all of a sudden, wait a second. Are we done with the test? Of course not. I now have 17 out of 52 questions that I have left over. There is no penalty on the SAT for guessing. No penalty for guessing. Okay, no penalty for guessing. That is so critical if you want to be a great test taker. If you don't want to do this, then you are not even, this isn't a strategy thing. You are just mathematically hurting yourself if you don't implement this. This isn't, and the thing that drives me crazy about, people that do this on YouTube besides us or other companies that I've worked for is just saying things to say them, right? That like, oh, this is this better strategy because I think so. That drives me crazy. And I used to work for companies that would make us say things to students like you should use this strategy or whatever. Ultimately, there are different strategies that are going to work for different students. So what I try to do in these videos is not give you some strategy that just I think works better because I'm telling you what to do. The things that I bring up in these videos and I think that are the most important are the mathematical certainties. This is not me guessing. This is not me saying you should do this and it might work. This is 1,000% mathematically certain to work by pure statistics. That if I just focus, right, if I focus on the 35 questions that I know how to do, and I take 64 minutes because I'm taking my time reading, I'm taking my time on accuracy, that leaves me with 17 questions left to go. On those 17 multiple choice questions, I'm going to pick the answer choice, pick the answer that you have used the least to that point. That you have used the least to that point on 17 questions. Now let's remember, guys, we're going to use that letter all the way down. And is that nerve-wracking? Let's say we have 35 and we're going all the way down to 52. Let's think about what that looks like on your bubble sheet, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. A, B, C, D. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Does it look weird and does it look uncomfortable and anxiety, right? A lot of stress, a lot of anxiety if I just keep bubbling in A or whatever the letter is. Does that create a lot of anxiety? Yes, unless we practice this. But guys, look, if you get 17 questions, 4 out of 17, right? That's the statistical guarantee. That's not even some crazy guessing technique like picking the least used answer. 4 out of 17 is a guarantee, 4 to 5, right? Just if you do, there's 4 answer choices. And you have a 4 to 5 if you just guess the same letter. You're going to get 4 to 5 additional questions. So in reality, that's actually 40 out of 52 questions. 40 out of 52. Well, let's go back. Let's see how that changes your score, right? If you go back to SAT Test 9 and you go back to the scoring guide, let's see how that effectively changes your score. All of a sudden, instead of getting 35, right, 35 out of 40, which was a 300, we've all of a sudden guessed our way down to 40 out of 52, and we've gotten to a 330, meaning that by just being great mathematical test takers, we've added 30 points to our score. If you guys implement this on every single section, can everybody give me a thumbs up if that makes sense, that idea? That thumbs up if that makes sense. If we implement this on every section of this test, you are going to gain, to be a better test taker, you are going to pick up 100 points. If you focus 100 points focusing on accuracy tomorrow, focusing on accuracy and not timing. I guarantee you will pick up 100 points tomorrow and not timing. If you give yourself more time to focus on questions that you know how to do, I'll guarantee that tomorrow, without any additional content work, without studying any additional content, if you focus on accuracy and you don't worry about rushing and feeling that overwhelming and stressful feeling that you get when you focus on time instead of accuracy, you will pick up 100 points. And watch what happens, right? If I come back up to the reading test, and let's say I answer all the way to question number 35. I just coincidentally, I've answered the first 35 in a row. Watch what happens if I pick, let's say, answer choice C or A, right? I have C or A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I even get a little lucky and I actually add up 6 questions for A. If I do it with C, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I get 6 there too. 6 questions on C as well. That's actually even that's now you're getting 6 additional questions. Now you're 41 out of 52 by pure mathematical certainties. This is not me guessing on these things. This is not me saying my strategy is better than yours. This is me saying that this is a strategy that everyone should implement and it will work for everyone, but it's up to you to actually implement it on test day. Okay, you have to actually be the one that implements this on test day. I can't be the one that does that for you. So that is the first, and again, this might not work. The idea of focusing on accuracy above all else definitely will work for tomorrow. It might not work in the sense that you have to that you can implement this drill that I had written down here. It might not work in that way, but you can absolutely, thumbs up guys if this makes sense. You can absolutely implement this idea before the test after this one. If you're not taking tomorrow's test, or a near future SAT, I would highly, strongly recommend implementing this reading technique, this idea, prior to starting the test. Prior to practicing ever again, right? By doing a reading section with these passages in mind and finding your best passage order, not rushing through every passage just because somebody told you to do that. You're focusing on the questions that you are best at, you are the most accurate on, and I just showed you that you can improve your score by 30 points without any content review solely by being a better test taker. So please make sure that you implement that and you implement that as quickly as you possibly can. Does that make sense? Everybody good? Can you guys say good to go? If you're watching live and you're in the chat, can you say good to go or give us a thumbs up? And we'll keep moving from there. Hopefully all of that stuff makes sense. I hope you guys are following along as much as you can. Okay, so beyond the scale and beyond the passage, right, that drill for finding the passage order, so let's just make a quick note here. Number 1, right, the three tips for reading, 3 tips for reading. Create reading chart. That's more long term. Create reading chart. Oops. 2, step 2, right? Focusing on accuracy. Focus on best passages and accuracy. Then guess. Same letter. Same least used, I should say. Least used letter for remaining questions, for unanswered questions at the end with about a minute to go. Right? Give yourself maybe a minute at the end. Minute. That's a horrible handwriting. Sorry, guys. Minute at the end. Okay. And finally, number 3 that we're going to cover is how to tackling direct and evidence-based follow-up questions. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far, guys? Again, feel free to answer. I know there's quite a few of you guys watching live. If you guys have any questions that you want answered, this is the time to do it. We can answer any questions. Don't be embarrassed, right? Don't be. It's anonymous anyway, right? You don't have to. You're never gonna see people again. But this is a great time to be asking questions if you have any. So please feel free to do that. So tackling direct and evidence-based questions. There's a really, really helpful and easy way to do this, but you got to try to implement it tomorrow as well. Let me see if I can find the. I think we have a individual video on this too. SAT reading, and it can be found in that playlist. Let me just see if we can find it. Yeah. Tackling the. Oops. Okay, guys, so if you guys want to watch that video, you can. Feel free to watch it. Okay, but continuing on, one of the question types that we see students miss all the time, and what's tricky about these ones is that if you miss the one, you kind of miss the second one, right? It's the one that says like in the line numbers with the best evidence, or what's the exact lines, right? Which choice provides the best evidence as an example for number 8? Which choice provides the best evidence for the previous question? Okay, most students tackle these questions incorrectly, and I'll give you a very, very good reason as to why that is. Most students, right, think about these questions with number 8, right, with number 8 being more important than number 7 as an example. And again, this is test 9 SAT reading. Most people think that question 8 here, question 8, which is the evidence-based question, right? The evidence follow-up, outweighs, right? You spend more time looking at question 8 than you do on question 7. And that couldn't be, right? This is the direct question, the first one. That couldn't be further from the truth, right? This is not what we want to do. Don't do this. Don't do this. Okay, for tomorrow, don't do this. What I want you to recognize is that there are so many questions that look just like number 7 that don't have an evidence-based follow-up, right? That just don't have an evidence-based follow-up. Like number 3, right? There's no follow-up to that one, but that's a relatively straightforward question. Number 6, right? The narrative indicates, that's a relatively straightforward question. There are significantly two-thirds in fact, two-thirds of direct SAT reading questions have no evidence-based follow-up, And in those examples, right, you don't even have to, you don't have any line numbers to go back to. And that is so critical because everybody always immediately looks to the evidence-based questions first, right? Where are the line numbers? Because that gives us comfort. Oh, I have to go back to these line numbers. Don't do that. Instead, what you should do is you should read the direct question. This is the steps that I want everybody to take going forward on those evidence-based questions. Read and understand the direct question. And the direct question is always the first one, guys, right? This is direct, right? It's asking directly about something in the passage. This is evidence. Read and understand the direct. Direct first question. Don't look at the answers, just read and understand the question. Okay, everybody good with that? Step 2 is to look at line numbers. And I know I said be careful, right? Look at line numbers from follow-up, evidence-based question. as a group, not individually. This is so, so critical. Not individually. How many spellings falling apart here, guys? Not individually. And what I mean by that is that when you see the evidence-based questions, right, you are going to go back and you are going to look at these as a group. So you can see right here, right, this would be lines 46 through 58. You're going to read all of those lines again, and you're going to have, so you're going to look at those as a group, and then you're going to have question 7, have direct question in mind, while you read all of those lines, while reading all of those lines. Okay, thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. So again, when we know it's 46 through 58, 59, we are not going to go back and start looking individually at those lines. We're going to go back and we're just going to reread this paragraph, right? Just reread the whole thing. Don't be thinking about individual line numbers. You're going to reread that paragraph and you're going to understand what question 7 is asking, and you're going to answer question 7. You are using these as a reference. This is a reference, not as a tool to get you to the right answer. You're using it as a reference. You're thinking about question number 7, and the beauty of this is if you use this strategy correctly, wherever you find the right answer to this is going to be immediately apparent what the right answer to this is. We should really never think about this follow-up question except for in the reference of a large portion of the lines, right? So you're not reading this as like, okay, 46 through 48. That's answer choice A. No, you're thinking, let me go back. I'm going to reread this paragraph with the intention of trying to answer question number 7, just like you would do. Think about this, guys, right? And why this is so critical. You would do that exact same thing on any direct question that didn't involve evidence, right? If you didn't have follow-up line numbers, you would do that on every other direct question. You'd read it and you'd say, oh yeah, I remember where that was. Let me go back and try to find it. And you would just go back and probably reread an entire paragraph to try to answer that question. Thumbs up if that makes sense. And that's what you would do, right? And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Is you want to attack these just like you would do any other direct question. And the beauty here is that if you do it this way, you actually have a huge advantage, right? With those other direct questions that don't tell you where you need to go back to, you just have to kind of remember it from your reading. This is like that, except they do tell you where to go back to generally, and you're just skimming that area or you're rereading the area in question, but they tell you where to go back to. The biggest misconception is that we need to worry about question number 8. Question number 8 will happen if we generally think about the line numbers they give us. They give us 46, and the last line is 59, actually. 46 through 59 is that one paragraph. I'm going to read all of those as a bunch. I'm going to find the answer to question 7 within that bunch, within that paragraph, because that's where they're telling me to look. And then lo and behold, wherever I find that answer to number 7 is also going to happen to be the right answer to number 8. Does everybody understand that process? That is so critical, because if we don't do that, it's so easy to miss both of these questions, and we're basically kind of giving away what should be easy points or what should be free points. Does that make sense? Any questions there? So thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Thumbs up. If you guys want to have any follow-up to this, by the way, again, download Star U. Download Star U in the App Store, Google Play, or at one sec here, guys. Create a free student account and start practicing. Okay. If you guys, again, if you want any follow-up on this, hopefully that all makes sense. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense with regards to the reading section. If you do want any follow-up here, once you create your free Star U student account, you log in, you click Lessons and Practice Problems on the home screen. Then you click SAT Reading, and if you want any follow-up, you can click Direct and Evidence-Based Questions. You'll see it there as the number 3 bar, and you can start reading more about that in more depth with more example questions, okay, and do some practice questions related to those evidence-based reading questions. So strongly encourage you guys to look at that as much as you can. Okay, everybody good? Thumbs up, guys, in the chat, or thumbs up in the thumbs up in the chat, guys, if all of this makes sense before we move on to the writing and language section. Everybody good there, guys? Everybody good? Okay. Cool. All right. So let's keep going, guys. Let's keep moving. All right. So beyond Star U and helping you there, let's go on and let's look at the writing and language section. Okay. Let's talk briefly about writing and language and how important it is. This is the section, guys, that everybody should be. You should really focus on this section in your preparation. So section number 2, just for those that are new to the SAT, just all around. Section number 2 is always right, and it should be if you're ever taking a practice test. Section 2 is always the writing and language test, which is basically just English grammar and sentence structure, writing and language. Okay, and this is just grammar plus sentence structure. And the beauty of this, guys, sentence structure, is that you can memorize all of these rules. Okay, you can memorize all of these rules. The writing and language section is graded independently of the reading section. Reading, as we talked about, was out of 400. Writing and language is out of 400. So I would spend 99% of my time between these two. I would spend 99% of my time here and 1% of my time here until I got a maximum writing and language score. Can everybody give me a thumbs up? The writing and language test is by far easier than the reading test. By far for every student. Whether English is your first language, if English is your first language, if it's not your first language, if you're an international student, if you're a US student, regardless, the writing and language test is way easier than the reading test. So if that's the case and you're struggling on these two, I need you to focus here on the writing and language section far before you focus on the reading section. Okay, way before you focus on the reading section. Because again, if you get a 400 on writing and language and you get a 300 on reading, that still balances out to a 700 overall. So please make sure that you're taking that into account. Okay, thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. The writing and language test is always 44 questions, and you're going to have 35 minutes to complete this. Okay, 35 minutes to complete this. There is a break. I should mention this as well. There is a break in between reading, right, and the writing and language section. You'll have a 10-minute break, writing and language. So just know that for when you get to the test tomorrow. There will be a break in between reading and writing and language, and that gives you a chance to kind of regroup and start to be thinking, right? Think logically about your grammar rules. Start to think logically about your grammar rules. Okay? Two of the most important videos that we have on the entire channel, two of the most watched, two of the most important, deal with SAT writing and language grammar rules. Let me post the most important SAT writing and language most important grammar rules. Again, please make sure as much as you can to watch that. Thumbs up, guys, if you see that, if you guys are following along. We post another one that's going to be helpful. You can find it here quickly. I don't know if I can find it right now. But in any case, guys, I would highly encourage you, really strongly encourage you to watch those. I think that is as from a content perspective, that is as important as any section that you guys are going to cover. That's as important as any video. The other nice thing here, guys, is that you can, if in terms of the Star U app, this breaks down, Star U on the SAT writing and language front breaks down every single one of the most important grammar rules with practice questions associated with that. So punctuation is number one always. If you read through the punctuation questions here, you can always come through and then you can do 5 practice questions that are specifically related to just punctuation questions. So this is probably the one area of Star U that's the best, right? It's the best for SAT writing and language and for math as well. But I strongly encourage you guys to be doing practice questions as often as you can. Here are the rules that you need to know most. Okay, number 1 is punctuation. If you don't know every punctuation rule and you're spending time on any other section, you are making a mistake. Punctuation is the most important lesson. Most important lesson of the entire SAT. Okay, the video that I just posted, coupled with the writing and language, coupled with this review, right, lessons and practice problems, writing and language, and then clicking punctuation. The video review I posted, coupled with these practice questions and this practice lesson, is the single most important lesson that you can cover on the entire SAT test. And the reason for that is because there are the most number of questions on the SAT are punctuation, proportional to their section. So for example, out of 44 questions, 10 out of 44 questions are equal to punctuation. That's 15%. That's more than 15% of the test. No, sorry, it's more than 25 rather. 25, is that right? Yeah, it's more than 25, or it's between 20 and 25% of the writing and language section is just punctuation questions. Think about that. Think about how ridiculous that is. If you just know every grammar rule related to punctuation, how many questions you will get right. The only one that even comes close to punctuation is linear equations under math. That's the only one that's even close, okay, in terms of value. And we'll talk about that in a second when we get to the math section. But if you do not know your punctuation rules and you are spending time on the reading section, you know that you've missed punctuation rules in the past, you are making a huge mistake, because these questions are so much easier, and more importantly, they are so much more consistent than anything that you're going to see on the reading section related to the SAT. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. That is so critical. I can't even begin to describe it. Okay, so critical that we're thinking about it in that way, and being right and making taking our best step forward, right, in terms of how we're going to improve. Not just saying I'm going to improve somewhere. I'm improving incrementally more on the learning punctuation rules than I am really covering any other section. Okay, so punctuation. You can see this in basically every one of these, right? So you'll see it. Let's see if we can find some punctuation, right? Number 6 is a punctuation question. This is on test number 9. 6 is punctuation. 12 is punctuation. There's 2. 14 is punctuation. There's 3. 17 is punctuation. There's 4. So 4 questions through the first 24. So 4 questions in the first ones. Let's see. Keep going here. 30 is punctuation. I'm sure I've missed a few as well. 36. 38. That's 7, I think. 40 is punctuation. And that might be it. So I think I counted 8, but I probably missed a few. But that's just like scrolling through this as quickly as I can. You can find 8 very, very obvious punctuation questions. I think if we really broke it down, there'd probably be 10. But yeah, let's say even if it was 8, that's still 20% of the writing and language test. That's 100 points, guys. Think about that. 8 out of 44 questions is equivalent to 100 points. 100 of the 1,600 total points on this test are related to basic punctuation rules. And if you know those rules and you never make a mistake on those, okay, you will improve your score again so quickly. Let's improve in the easiest way possible. Let's not just improve. Let's not just say we're going to improve without really having a plan in place. Okay, so again, please make sure that you're doing those things. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Thumbs up if that makes sense. You'll see it in the video that I posted related, that was just above, related to the most important grammar rules to cover on punctuation. But the thing that I would recommend is that you try to, so just as a quick rule for grammar and for punctuation, try to approach the punctuation questions in a specific order, in a certain order. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to look at punctuation, always look in the answer choices for a period first, followed closely by a semicolon. Okay, followed closely by a semicolon. Number 3 would be a colon. Okay, number 4 is a dash. And number 5, finally, where everybody first looks, right? Everybody always wants to look for the comma first. This is where 95% of students will always try to identify the comma error first. That is very incorrect from a mathematical standpoint. Let me show you why. A period for the SAT has one rule. It has one rule. The semicolon for the SAT has one rule, right? A colon for the SAT has one rule. A dash for the SAT has 2 rules. A comma for the SAT has 5 rules. You need to know 5 different rules related to a comma. That is a horrible decision then when the first 5 here that you'll see, the first 4 rather, all have a combined 5 rules, the same as the comma. The only reason that students look to the comma first is because it's the one that's most familiar. The reason it's the most familiar is because it appears the most in literature, because there are 5 different times that it could appear. So why in the world would we focus on the comma when there are way easier ways to answer these question types without ever having to look at the comma error? For example, okay, let's see if we have a better, and this is in that video again, guys. Okay, for example, if we know that a semicolon, right, separates 2 independent clauses, that's what a semicolon does, 2 independent clauses that are closely related, but for the SAT's purposes, you don't need to worry about them being closely related. Let's read on each side of the semicolon. While fare-free policies do increase ridership, if I put a semicolon right here and I look here, is that a full sentence? Is that 2 independent clauses, which is what's required for a semicolon, right? Semicolon followed by another full sentence. Do I have a full sentence on the left side of that semicolon? No, I don't. So I eliminate answer choice D. And while that doesn't get us to the right answer, it gets one of the answer choices out of the way in 2 seconds. If you follow this rule, and again, it's covered in that video that I just posted. This is going to be covered in way more depth, so I encourage you to watch it. But if you follow this order and you don't stray from that order and you're looking for those to eliminate or to answer the question there, if you look at these, this will help you so much. Let me give you another example. Let's see if this one is, see what run where we have the semicolon as the right answer here. If there is one with a semicolon in the right answer. Nope, that's not good. Anybody that's following along here, guys, you can run test number. Come on, give me. Okay, semicolon. Let's see if this is one. Field work in a city has to be done intermittently. The construction crew had to proceed 1 block at a time to avoid interrupting traffic, and the archaeologist team work was periodically halted. Okay, so if I look at the semicolon, that's where I'm going to start, right? I would put a semicolon here. I look to the left of this. Is that a full sentence? Yes, that one for the first time is a full sentence. It's a ridiculously long sentence, but it is a full sentence. But if I look to the right, and I say by stormy weather, right? By stormy weather and discovery of toxic materials underground, that is not a full sentence. Boom, the semicolon is eliminated. That's the only rule we have to memorize. So why in the world would we be focused on the million different comma rules that we have to memorize before just eliminating the semicolon altogether? Again, if you didn't see that video that I just posted, it's just above. Check out video to see more punctuation rules in action. Okay? So check out that video above. We're going to stop there with the writing and language because ultimately the writing and language test is so much about just memorizing grammar rules. And if you do those things, you are going to be in phenomenal shape as you start to approach this test and any test in the future. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense before we move on to the math section. Okay, thumbs up. Hopefully that all makes sense related to writing and language. Writing and language. Any questions on that, guys? Thumbs up if that makes sense before we move on to math. Everybody generally good there? Okay. So guys, on the math sections, as we've talked about, there are a certain order that I would say that I would recommend that everybody try to understand here. There's a certain order that we want to try to take on the math section. Okay. The math section is broken up, like I said, into two different sections: math no calc, right, which is section 3, math no calc, and math with calc, which is section 4. Okay. This has 20 questions. This has 38 questions, but this is distinct. That between the SAT and the ACT, the math sections of the SAT are the only sections that have free response questions. It's the only sections on either test. So of the 20 questions, for example, on the math no calc section, right, the first 15, 1 through 15, are all multiple choice, and the next 5, 16 through 20, are all free response. This creates something that's really interesting that relates back to that reading section and the guessing method that we had. Every question on this test, every question on the math sections, every question on math is equal point value. Right? So you get one right is equal point value. You get the same number of points as you get another one right. But this creates something that's important. Okay? First and foremost, we need to know that questions 1 through 15, right, all multiple choice, these are in order of difficulty. Order of difficulty. So they get harder as they go, right? They get harder as they go. And then we also need to know that questions 16 through 20 are in order of difficulty, right? 16 through 20, these guys, right, are also in order of difficulty. And that tells us something, right? That tells us first and foremost that the most important questions on this test are the easy ones, not the hard ones. And this gives us a very distinct advantage because if we recognize that unlike the reading and the writing and language sections, we can strategize as to which questions we want to see first. So here's what we tell our students is that first we want you to go 1 through 5. These are easy questions, right? Easy questions. This is no calc, by the way, no calc. You go 1 through 5. These are easy multiple choice. Okay, we got to get 100% accuracy if we know how to answer those. 100% accuracy. Okay, from there, we're going to go 16 through 20. These are the free response questions. Remember, guys, that these 10 questions, okay, 1 through 5 and 16 through 20 are much higher value. Okay, and I'll tell you why, even though we said everything's the same point value, are much higher value than 6 through 15 on the no calc section. Every question is worth the same point. Point equals point, right? Points equal point. But we know that the free response, no guessing on the free response, no guessing, right? No guessing on the free response. And we also know that these are easier questions. So we cannot afford to miss these questions. If everything is the same point value, this is where we want to spend our time. We need to get 10 out of 10 here before ever worrying about 6 through 15. Now, I realize that questions 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are also relatively straightforward. Okay? But that doesn't mean that we should focus on those before we focus on the really easy questions, which are without doubt 1 through 5 and 16 through 20. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. The same thing then applies to the math with a calculator section, and I would try to do these in order. I would say 1 through 10, right? 1 through 10 are all multiple choice. Those are the easier multiple choice. On this is on the calc section, section 4 now. Okay, section 4. And then I would move to 31 through 38, which are the free response questions, and spend as much time as necessary to get these questions right. These, once again, are worth more, right? These are worth more for a lot of different reasons that we've kind of discussed here than questions 11 through 30, which are all the harder multiple choice questions, right? Level 1 and level 2 multiple choice are 11 through 30. Level 1 plus 2, or I'm sorry, 2 plus 3, rather, 2 plus 3 multiple choice. These are all level 2 and 3 out of 3 multiple choice questions. So if we know that, right, why in the world would we be spending any time, these are the easier ones, not, right, these are the easier ones here. Why would we be worried about the harder questions and the ones that we can guess on, right? If you need to guess, you can guess on these questions. You cannot do that on the free response, and we cannot afford to miss the easy multiple choice just because we're worried about getting to the harder ones. That doesn't make any sense. That wouldn't make any sense, right? We can't afford that. Does that make? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if you understand that, right? That I would prefer that on during Saturday's test, if you're taking it, that on no calc section 3, no calc, which is section 3, that you do these questions in this order: 1 through 5, right? Multiple choice. Then you move to 16 through 20, free response, and then you move to 6 through 15, multiple choice. If you don't know how to do a question, if you don't know, skip it. Skip it. Either come back, or guess the same letter at the end. Okay? So you're either going to skip it and come back to it, or you're going to guess the same letter at the end. That's why the free response are so critical. That's why they have a higher value, because not only are they generally easier overall at every level than the multiple choice for a reason, right? Because they are free response. But on top of that, you can't guess on those. If worst comes to worst, you have to guess on all 11 through 15 of the multiple choice here. That doesn't really matter because you can guess, right? And you can't do that on 16 through 20. Thumbs up if that makes sense. So this is how I would approach the no calc order of this test tomorrow, and we'll stop there. I don't want to get too much into like real in-depth strategy on the math section, just because I think it's going to probably confuse you more than it's going to help you for tomorrow. All right, and then on section number 4, which is the calc section 4, okay, we're going to go 1 through 10, then 31 through 38, and then finally we're going to go back to 11, and we're going to go 11 through 30. That's the order, right? 1, 2, 3. And if we can stick to that order and we can stick to those questions, I think you're going to find that your score is going to go up naturally. Because if the worst comes to worst on those harder multiple choice questions, we can always come back to guess, right? We can always come back to guess. Okay, guys, does that all make sense? That's the order. That would be the order of questions that I would do for tomorrow. And that's the big stuff, guys. That's how I want you to approach this. Oh, one last thing. There are 3 sections on math. So there are 3 math sections that you want to be very aware of. Math, most important math concepts. Okay, if you're going to study anything tonight, study one of these 3 things, most important math concepts. 1, linear equations. I cannot stress how often linear equations appears on this test. Linear equations, number 1. Number 2, factoring. Make sure that you know everything there is to know about factoring, about the quadratic equation. Okay, number 3, systems of equations. If you know those 3 systems of equations, you will know a third of the test before you even sit down. This makes up one third, or more. I'd say it's closer to probably 2/5, 40%. 40% of math section is based on these 3 question types of both sections. So if you memorize each one of these, and the beauty again in all of this is that we have all of this within the app. So if you go to Star U, you back it up and you go to the math section instead of writing in language. So SAT math, right? You can find the factoring section here, right? You can find systems of equations. This is all going to be at the bottom of the SAT math section. So again, if there's any reason for you to download Star U beyond the punctuation rules, it's these next three. It's these next three. Does that all make sense, guys? Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. So those three question types, if you can memorize those three, if you can memorize punctuation, if you're going to focus or study on any concepts tonight, make sure that it's one of those four, right? Factoring, linear equations, systems of equations, or on the writing and language section, focus on punctuation rules. All right, focus on punctuation rules. So final thing, guys, here before I let you go, because I know that you're probably anxious to get started. I'm just gonna summarize. Download Star U in the App Store and Google Play, and set up your free Star U student account. Okay, that's first. Complete practice questions tomorrow morning, okay, before the test. For the test, complete practice questions tomorrow morning out of our SAT pre-test packet. So SAT pre-test packet, that can be found in that link that I just posted. So those two. And then finally, check it out. Okay, so you guys can join our membership program. All right, guys. So I think that's probably it for today. If anybody has any questions while you're preparing, please make sure that you ask those questions below the video. And okay, after you guys are done watching, or if you're watching the recording after this, please make sure that you watch that. Obviously, if you have any questions for us, you can feel free to again comment below. One of our teachers or tutors will answer those questions. Otherwise, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Good luck preparing for this test or for any test moving forward. I hope this was helpful just from a general strategy perspective and getting you in the right mindset for tomorrow's test. I posted a number of helpful free links that you can watch for video content. And yeah, I hope that was helpful, guys. I hope that you guys have a great day. Thumbs up one more time if you enjoyed what you saw today. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel by clicking subscribe at the very least. That's free. That will give you access and give you a notification. Turn on all notifications. That will give you notifications for all of our future videos as we post those. Otherwise, again, good luck studying. Good luck preparing for the SAT in March, today, or rather tomorrow, or whenever your next test may be. And of course, again, post any comments or questions below this video, and one of our teachers or tutors will answer those. All right, guys, again, have a great rest of your day. Hopefully that was helpful, and good luck on your next test. See you soon.